know if you know this, when you move from a country that doesn't speak English to a country that does speak English, you can pick a new name. So my parents couldn't name themselves anything. So my mom named herself Candy, like the dessert. And my dad named himself Smiley, like a total idiot. Candy and Smiley. That is a real names. And the names makes no sense, because Smiley never smiles.
So yes, sir, this is Kevin Bourne, also known as KB, the boss and the editor of ShifterMagazine.com. And we have this distinct pleasure of sitting down with Ed Hill, who is a Vancouver-raised Taiwanese comedian, and his newest comedy special, Candy and Smiley, presented by Comedy Dynamics, will be premiering on March 2nd on Comcast, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, as well as a host of other platforms. So we have the opportunity to sit down with him ahead of the release of the special, just to talk about it, as well as some of the issues that are happening right now in the Asian community in North America. So once again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So first question, in your op-ed from mobtoronto.com, you talked about your experience in immigrating to Canada from Taiwan at 10 years old. Can you maybe give us a little bit more of an idea of just what your experience was when you first moved to this country?
Yeah, so my parents immigrated here from Taipei, Taiwan in 1994, and it was November 10th. I know the date to the exact day. And we moved here in the middle of a snowstorm. So as somebody's from, a more tropical place, we never seen snow before. And it was a massive snowstorm. Most of our belongings are still on the ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's coming here, being shipped over. So my brother and I, we slept on a mattress in the middle of the living room next to the fireplace, because at that time, we also didn't have heat in the house yet. That's not set up yet. So we're in this snowstorm. It's freezing. We're on the mattress. And my dad told us that we're going on vacation. That's our understanding. And apparently 26 years later, we're still on vacation. So my introduction to Canada was this bit of a desolate, isolate place that was very different than home. And, being here, of course, I didn't speak the language. So I had this, I learned some English in Taiwan. I went to some classes, but really all I could say was, hi, how are you? Where's the bathroom? And if you tell me where the bathroom is, I actually don't know what that means. So actually it's not helpful at all, because I only know how to say the question, but the answer I can't actually comprehend. So I won't know where the bathroom actually is. I couldn't pronounce the name of my teacher when I entered the classroom. Her name was just not a sound I've heard before. And I think the most interesting part, I still remember it to this day, is she got a few, there's only a few Asian kids in the classroom at that time in 1994. And they weren't from Taiwan. They were from different parts of Asia. They spoke different languages. But I think just because we look alike, she's like, well, help Ed, because obviously you guys know each other. And you can see the kids like, I don't know what to do. He doesn't speak our language. We're not even from the same country. So I very quickly came to that dissonance where, I think my appearance may mean something very different to people. And, my dad was always reminding me over the years that, remember, you may feel as if you are acculturated and, part of the greater society, but remember the first impression people have you is that you look Taiwanese, you look Asian, and you have to take that into account. Not that, to expect any hostility, just, be ready, because that's the perception that you're going to walk into.
Mm-hmm. And I find that actually pretty interesting. Like when I was reading the op-ed and I read the part about your teacher kind of lumping you guys together, or even kids on the schoolyard, just, saying, hey, go back to China. I kind of really resonated with that, because even as a Black person, like, people always assume, hey, okay, you're either going to be Jamaican, or you're, people always kind of assume that Black is Black, but it's like there's so many different expressions of Black, and you tend to get lumped together, just being in this umbrella of being Black with it. There's people from the Caribbean, there's people from Africa, there's those who are like, Black Canadian, and yeah, you tend to get really lumped together. So I really kind of resonated with that part of your story. So right now there's a lot of headlines both in Canada and in the US just about a lot of the hate crimes against Asian people. You're seeing it you're seeing it every day on the news. I mean, obviously, like you've been in this country a long time, like the level of hate right now that we're seeing against Asian people, is this something that you've seen before? Is it kind of at an all-time high right now?
It's definitely more prevalent now, but I wish I can say this is something new. It's not new. And I'll tell you, I had two incidents with the police in the past. Not anything of my own doing. Once when I was in my early 20s, my girlfriend and I were going to go pick up something at a local pub. She left her homework with a friend, so they're at the pub, so going to go pick it up. So it was me in the passenger seat, my girlfriend driving at the time, and then her friend in the back. And they're both Caucasian. I'm the only Asian person in the car. And I guess we drove into a situation where there was a fight that broke out of the pub. So, there was a lot of police car around. So we're like, you know what, maybe it's not a good time to be here. I don't really want to walk into it, have my girlfriend walk the situation to pick up homework where there's might be, danger. So we kind of start, driving out. And I guess as we driving out, we bump into the sheriff's truck. And the sheriff's truck, I think, was attending to a body on the ground. We're not sure as what happened. But then the sheriff runs towards us, sees me in the car, and immediately tells me to put my hands up. And slowly, with my right hand, unbuckle my left seatbelt. And this whole time this happening, there's a guy behind him, I guess is one of the workers of the pub, saying, hey, that's not the guy. Well, that's not who we're looking for. This is totally not the right person. But he wants me to continue. The minute I unbuckle my seatbelt, he dragged me out of the car, slammed me to the cement. And I guess he was looking for blood on me somewhere. And I was in my pajamas. I was just there to support my girlfriend picking up her homework. And, at the end of it, he kind of say, okay, you just look like the guy I was looking for. And we're all like, what does that mean? Like, because there's two other people in the car. So somebody who's not white, is that what you're looking for? And the other incident was actually not too long ago. It was I think it was 4 years ago, actually. I lived in the condo complex at that time, was driving home. And our condo complex had this roadblock in the middle that kind of, you can't turn left or right into it because it blocks in the middle. So you kind of have to go to the end of the street and do a low U-turn and come back and turn into it. Everybody on the block does it. So I just kind of follow suit, right? This is the custom. I see everyone does it. So I'm not going to, drive all the way around the city just to get back home. So we get pulled over one time. I was driving my wife's car 4 years ago. And then police comes to the door, asks for license registration. And then he asked me, so how long have you been here? I said, oh, I just moved here, about 3 months ago. And he said, no, how long have you been in this country? And I said, well, I've been here for 25, 22, 23 years. And he's like, well, maybe you can learn to drive like you're from here. So, at that point, I didn't know what to say. My wife and I just kind of looked at each other. And then my wife's Caucasian. So he kind of looked at her. He's like, ma'am, is this your car? And she said, yes. And he's like, since it's your car, I'm going to let you go. And it's just a warning. And as he drove away, my wife was like, was that racist? I'm like, what do you think? He let us go because this is a white person's car. If it was my car, who knew what would happen? And, every roadblock I've ever driven through, I will have my wife drive because they wave us through. If it's me, I don't drink personally. I don't never touch alcohol. They pull me over every time. They get me to do the breathalyzer, all that stuff when I don't drink. And I'm coming back from performances where I can't drink on stage. So there's no reason as to why I have to go through all these process. And I think the most disheartening, like, your question was recently hasn't been elevated violence towards the Asian community. Yeah, that's for sure. My cousin got elbowed in the head just walking down the streets of Vancouver about, I would say 7 months ago. He was just walking down the street, going to get some groceries, and some random guys came and elbowed him in the head and ran away. He reported the police. There were some videos recorded, but they weren't able to do much about it. So it is, there is a heightened, I believe, activity of hatred towards the Asian community. And I think, people of color in general.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting because, I obviously have my experience as a Black male in this country. And that's kind of my lens. So I don't ever think about the experience of other people of color. Like, I obviously now just with Indigenous people, you're hearing more about it. So I have an idea of just the Indigenous experience and obviously my own experience, but I don't ever think that about just the experience of other people of color in Canada. So when I'm hearing your experience, I'm hearing my experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's very intriguing because I don't ever again think about the fact that there's so many other people of color who just have this similar experience, my similar experience, because I'm always kind of in my bubble of just being a black man. Something that I've always kind of thought about is, I know for me, I often feel kind of invisible, or the past always felt very invisible in Canada. Especially you're not seeing the stories on Canadian television, and whatnot. I know in recent times there's been more of a appetite just to, we're seeing more Black people in commercials as a result of George Floyd. You're seeing Black people on TV. You're seeing a lot more even in retail displays. But I don't see Asian people. Like, I don't see Asian people in commercials. Like, just be, if you're looking at diapers, you don't see like Asian fathers, Asian mothers, like, in certain commercials and stuff. And just kind of, daily life. Like, do you feel that sense of invisibility just as in Canada, just as an Asian person, just not seeing yourself represented in different settings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question because I've done interviews before where radio hosts are white, and I bring up the topic of white supremacy, and then the first response is always defensiveness. They're like, "What do you think I'm better than you?" And I said, "No, I don't think you're better than me. I don't think anybody's better than anybody else." And I think they interpret supremacy as superior. That's not what we're saying. I think to answer your question is white is normal. That's normalcy, right? What you see is, if you think of movie stars, if you think of any type of portrayal in media, if you think of political figures, you immediately go to, well, must be a white person. And that normalcy then becomes power, because when you're perceived as normal, then now there's there's diffusion of responsibility. So for example, if I decide, let's say, to eat a can of tuna in the middle of a train station and I spill over myself, the likelihood is people are going to think that's what Asian people do. They eat tuna and they spill and they smell. It's not just a guy who accidentally spilled tuna on his pants. But if it's a white person does it, they think, oh, that guy just messed up, right? He's having a bad day. So there's that diffusion of responsibility, and that's heavy for all of us, people of color, because we represent so much more than just ourselves. And I think that's why this representation in the media is so important, because those stories, people are like, well, why do we need to tell these stories of people of different origins? Because it established a sense of normacy, that every story is the human story, and it's not just a white story. And then it will impact everyday life, because then you will have the freedom to be you, rather than having to be an Asian person, to be a Black person, to be a Hispanic person, to be an Indigenous person. You can just be you. Now, at this point, we don't have that privilege. We can't just be us, because whatever we do becomes the representation of all of us. And it's not a fun place to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely true. Yeah. Let's talk about comedy, because obviously it's your field. Canada's produced a lot of comics over the years. The Norm Macdonalds, the Tom Greens, Russell Peters. How do you feel like Canada fares when it comes to launching comedic talent in general, but also when it comes to launching ethnic comedians? And part of the reason why I even want to talk to you is because, I mean, you've seen, Black comedians and comedians who are people of color in the US. But I feel like Canada, you don't really see a lot of that comedic talent in Canada, especially who are ethnic. So how do you feel Canada fares when it comes to just, in a sense, being like launching comedic talent in general, but especially then people of color who are comedians?
I think in general for comedians and comedic talent, I think Canada has a lot to offer. A lot of famous comedians you see in the United States are Canadian. However, I think goes back to the last question is the diversity aspect. We can definitely do a lot better. It's kind of sad to see where it's at right now. I mean, just for last festival, there is a show every year called the Ethnic Show, and that's where the the non-white people do the show. The fact that you need to have an ethnic show just to show how abnormal we are, because why can't you have a Canadian show and have people from all walks of life be part of it, right? We're all Canadian, we're all part of this society, we all contribute in different ways. So I think that's definitely a lot of work ahead of us. The Canadian story is just not it's not just the white story. There's a lot more to that, and you started seeing a little more of it with Kim's Convenience, which is great. And all these different shows that's coming up, and hopefully then captures the true Canadian story, which is all our stories.
Now you just brought up Kim's Convenience, which is obviously a very, very popular show. And I think in recent years, we've seen a little bit more just, Asian content out there. Kim's Convenience, Crazy Rich Asians, Always Be My Maybe, which I absolutely love. And a lot of this content is just normalizing, like showing kind of Asians that just use universal stories, like just being normal, like falling in love and family dynamics. And then I think they're also Marvel's first Asian, I think, Asian film is supposed to be coming out soon. Do you feel like there's been progress when it comes to just the telling of these kinds of stories, like Asians being represented on screen? And what do you think about the success that some of these shows and films have been having?
And it's great to see. It's good to see that people. I know I've been speaking with a lot of people, both within the comedy community and outside the community, talking about these shows and movies, and then they go, I really enjoyed it. I didn't know if I was gonna like it, but actually, I laughed through the whole way, and I can really resonate on some subject matters. And then my own, shows and performance, also people come up to me and say, hey, my dad's just like that, my mom's just like that, my brother is just like that, my family is just like that. And I think, that speaks really a lot for many different cultures that is trying to tell their story, because these are just all human stories. We all have a mom in our lives and dads in our lives, brothers in our lives that does things we're like, why are you doing the way things you're doing? And, so I think more and more of these representation is definitely going to help us come together and also see each other as humans rather than just, what we look on the surface.
Definitely. A few years ago, I was at the Canadian Screen Awards, like the weekend there, and I was at the fanfare, and they had a lineup like all around the building, and a lot of the people in line were like, Asian grandmothers and people of all ethnicities, and they were there to meet the cast of Kim's Convenience, and people were just wrapped around the building, and I was like, that's absolutely amazing. And I got to meet the lead actor there who plays Appa. I can't remember his name in real life, but I got a chance to interact with him, a few of our team members, and he was really like, he kept saying like, we're in this together. We're talking about representation of Black and Asian people on screen, and he kept saying throughout the night, he's like, we're in this together, guys. Like, it's, we're on the same team. And I felt that was absolutely amazing. So let's talk about the special. Like that's kind of the reason why we're talking here. The special airs on March 2nd. Congratulations on that. It's your first 1 hour special. For those who've never seen you perform live, like what can people expect from the show?
Well, I think one thing you expect is that this is not like any comedy special you've seen before. It's not filmed in a theater. It's not in a comedy club. It's filmed inside this open space with a small circle of people who each of them have a connection with me. Either they're a friend, a colleague, a family member. And it's almost like this idea of the story circle, from the Indigenous culture. And as I tell these stories, throughout the special, people start joining the circle. So my brother will join, my cousin will join. And at the very end, of course, my parents join. At the final moment that the circle is complete, and it's called Candy and Smiley because that's her names, and that's also the circle represents the circle of life, where who I am is really a combination of Candy and Smiley. As much as I like to deny it, so I'm we all been 17, we're like, I'm never gonna be like my parents, and there's no way, and then you're 35, you're like, oh my god, I'm exactly like my parents. So there's that understanding, acceptance that I'm a synthesis of the best of them, and this is who I am. And that's something, you know, the audience would get to see, and then they get to see, you know, the stories behind, you know, what made me who I am today, and some of the things that you may not just see on stage. So it's a
Mhm.
definitely more intimate experience, and you get to see the people's reaction within the room as we go.
Now, speaking of your parents, Candy and Smiley, I know a lot of ethnic parents can be very difficult or have big ambitions for their kids. Like, what do they think of just about you? First of all, about you having this special, but just their son being a comedian. Like, what are their thoughts on your career, your path, the career path you've chosen?
Oh, it's funny you bring that up because so the final scene when walking up to the circle, they had to do a few takes. So first of all, they can't line up; they're walking. So the two of them just can't walk at the same speed for some reason. So that was, you know, a a monumental task. And so they finally, you know, timed their speed to walk into the circle. And then the director's like, cut, hold on. So he once goes over to my dad and say, hey, Smiley, can you just look like you're proud of Ed? And my dad just went, I don't know what that looks like. Like, that's not gonna, this is my face. And this is how it's gonna work. And my parents always been that way. And I think, you know, inherently, I think they're proud of what I'm doing because they do share, you know, the press clippings, and then, you know, the different TV experiences I've been on. And they tell people and stuff like that. And then recently my mom was like, hey, I almost got scammed by a telephone company. I'm going to send you the story so you can put it on your podcast. Because I do this weekly podcast about my either stories about me, my childhood, a story between me and my parents. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she's listening to this. Like, I thought she was not, obviously she knows he's being captured in these stories. So I think it's that strange dichotomy that they're like, they have to appear as if they are, you know, you can do better, but I think within their, you know, they're supported and they're proud of what I'm doing. And I know it's different. It's definitely not when you immigrate thousands of miles across the world, your first thought is like, oh, maybe my son will be a stand-up comedian. That's never the first thought. But, you know, I'm thankful for what they've done, and I'm thankful for everything they're doing. And this special is almost like a tribute to them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as a son of immigrants, you can never thank your parents enough. There's nothing I can do that can repay all the sacrifice they made. And I hope this is a little bit to give just that little thanks.
And how would you describe like your comedic style? And is it informed at all by, say, your family upbringing or your cultural upbringing?
My style is very personal.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend not to go outward. I tend to go inward. So my perceptions, my fears, my flaws, and how that connects with the people in my life. And it's that parallel resonance. There's some observation of the world, of course. I mean, I'm not detached from the world, but
Mm-hmm.
any observation is gone through that, you know, that internal and that relational lens rather than just, you know, complete objective. I wish I can be, you know, Seinfeld and those guys could be complete objective. I just can't. I can, like my wife said, I can only be me. You can try to be someone else, it's never going to happen because Ed just can't do it. He can only be himself.
Mm-hmm. And was there any apprehension about launching a comedy special in the middle of a pandemic? Was there any kind of fear or apprehension around that?
Yeah. So the special wasn't originally designed this way. It was going to be done in the theater. At the University of British Columbia at the Telestudio Theater, but exactly 2 weeks prior to the taping, Vancouver went to lockdown. So it was that high, and then there's that low, and there was a lot of discussion with the production team as to, well, how do we navigate this? Do we wait until this whole thing's over? Do we try to be creative? Because I mean, it's still not over. There's a reason why we're talking on Zoom. So I think it came to a point where we're like, I think we had to figure out a way to be able to tell the same story without losing the essence of it. And I've never been a person who's fearful of intimate situations. I find smaller crowds and smaller spaces to be actually more freeing. So I said, why don't we do it this way? And in conversation with Comedy Dynamics and the production team, and of course my parents, they're like, okay, that's fine. Well, when I got to be honest here. When I told my dad first the idea, he's like, well, where's my contract? I'm like, okay, let's just talk later. This is not going to go anywhere if that's your first response. I'll let you think about it.
Interesting. Um, Now, for people that like, I mean, before we go, I want to kind of get an idea of just where do you see yourself going? Like, what's the goal for you as a comedian? Like, do you see yourself like, do you have kind of any ambitions of whether it's movies or sitcoms or anything of that nature, or maybe some other kind of creative outlets that you kind of see yourself exploring in the future?
When I was younger, I had all these goals, to be on this show, to be on that show, to perform for this many people. I think now, to be honest, I don't know if it's just age or just been doing it for so long. I just want to have a good time doing it, be able to tell my story, be true, and do it in the way that's fun. If it's, if anything compromises that, then I don't think I'll do it. And it doesn't matter how big the show is, doesn't matter how many people are watching. I think if what's coming out is not going to be authentic and genuine, I think it's actually going to do more harm than good for all of us. So that's really my goal, is to be able to keep doing it and have people listen and people participate, at the same time be true to who I am.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I definitely look forward to seeing the show. If people want to find you, you mentioned you have a podcast. If people want to find you either on social media or your podcast, where can people find you?
So my website is kingedhill.com. The reason why there's King in front of it, because I don't know if you've been to Vancouver, Kevin, there's a street in Vancouver called King Edward. So I thought it'd be hilarious when I started my career that to name it that way, because then people think, oh, it's like King Edward, it's such a funny pun. And I soon to realize most people don't live in Vancouver, and I just look like a pompous jerk. So that's why it's called kingedhill.com. I'm not a king by any means or any royalty. All my logins for Instagram and Twitter is King Ed Hill. If you want to check out my podcast, it's called Son of Smiley. And it comes up every week on every single streaming platform that you can find, Spotify, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Once again, this is Vancouver-based comedian Ed Hill, and his comedy show will be available on March 2nd on Comcast, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Google Play, Vimeo, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Once again, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Shift to